Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 351, and today's guest is Meredith McPherron, CEO and managing partner at Drive by DraftKings. Legalized sports betting, NIL, transfer portals, college conference realignment, streaming, pitch clocks, new kickoffs, the explosion of pickleball, and so much more. There's no denying it. The sports industry is going through a rapid amount of transformation. But the number one area that I'm the most excited about is the explosion of women's sports. From college basketball, WNBA, NWSL, Olympic success, and more, there is so much going on. Thus, I couldn't pick a better person to have a conversation about women's sports and how they're having a moment than with Meredith. And this topic is exactly how we kick off our conversation. If you're not familiar with Drive by DraftKings, the firm invests in seed and Series A companies in the sports tech and entertainment industry, specifically in gaming, fandom, and human performance. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Meredith's background story, including being a walk-on two-sport Division I athlete at Harvard, getting her career started in investment banking and consumer products at General Mills, and how she made the switch to the tech industry, running her own startup called Ziptiva, which was early to market and would have been perfect in today's world of NIL deals, her role at the Arthur Rock Center for Entrepreneurship at HBS, which was the perfect segue into her role as a venture capitalist at Glasswing Ventures, all the details about Drive by DraftKings and what she is targeting for investments, plus its all-star network, the biggest challenges around building a startup in the sports industry, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. It's hard to believe that we have over 350 episodes of the VentureFizz podcast. We have built up an amazing catalog of inspirational stories around building companies, and every episode includes lots of great advice to follow as well. If you haven't checked out our past interviews, go to venturefizz.com/podcast for the complete list. Oh, and one ask, please share the VentureFizz podcast with your friends and colleagues in the industry. I appreciate all of your support. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Meredith. Meredith, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Keith. It's great to be here, be with you.
I'm so excited because we've got a lot to cover, and there's so much going on in tech, sports, and what you're up to as an investor. And along the lines of sports, what I'm really excited about as a father of two girls is how women's sports is having this moment. I mean, it's just exploding. I watched the WNBA. Like I get, I mean, it's amazing. It's great basketball. It's the fundamentals. I mean, I'm just like, wow, this is how basketball used to be. This is exciting.
Right.
You know, women's soccer has been on the grid for a while, but now with the Olympics and the excitement again, the gymnastics team, I mean, and there's soccer leagues. I mean, there's so much going
Mhm.
on. So I thought talking to you, here's a perfect opportunity to learn more about this moment.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome way to kick it off. And a topic obviously so near and dear to my heart, both personally as an athlete. I also have a daughter who's a college athlete, tennis player. So it's been a long time passion of mine, and it's been a complete thrill to see the rise of women's sports as an industry now. I think as Deloitte predicted last year, be breaking that $1 billion barrier. That we all in the business and as athletes knew it had that potential and far beyond that potential to achieve. But yeah, we as a fund had a thesis really right from the start 3 years ago when we invested in just women's sports that it was now, like this was the market moment. And so much goes into that when you think about what makes for a market moment, where things actually that may have always been there in their potential break out into more of like mainstream understanding and acceptance. And for sports, for women's sports, there was just an unmet need, in my opinion. The product's always been there. Women have not just recently become great athletes. They've been, great athletes. Parents have been on the sidelines watching their girls, as I'm sure you have, you know, put it all out there and do everything that all athletes do, the grit, the effort, the energy, the fan experiences there has been there locally and now has just exploded. So it's been really about like has the media caught on? And did they believe that, if you gave it some visibility, people would actually watch it? And I think we've seen that, like you said, just the recent contracts from the NWSL at $240 million deal over 4 years. I think they're just getting started. And then the WNBA at the 260 million per season. I think that's the estimate now. It's just been a huge increase in recognition. And yeah, the Caitlin Clark effect was huge. And everyone wondered, like, would that transcend, the amazing March Madness numbers, 18 million viewership and exceeding the men's finals at 14 million. And, indeed, I think it has. It's just, gone on to show up at the WNBA finals and the All-Star game, is super exciting. Olympics, as you mentioned. And so there's just so much there, and we're thrilled to be right there with it.
And just not to focus too much on the WNBA, but that was so perfect how the Final Four happened, draft season so
Yeah.
you didn't lose any of the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese momentum that
Yes.
just right
Yes.
back. And then they've lived up to the expectation in a professional world too,
Yes.
where I mean, just watching the
Absolutely.
highlights of her just the past weekend and week, I was like
Right?
hitting
I
threes from
know.
all over the court. It just is
I
insane.
know. I know. I know. And
Uh,
I was just looking at this Twitter stream on her numbers versus Cheryl Swoops, and like, yeah, I mean, different time, different, but like pretty amazing, the MVP year versus the rookie year. And, just the sport and athletes come so far, the game changes, but it's just, good for her. Good for her. And
mhm.
and I was also thrilled to see just the WNBA All-Star game and people getting out there voting, with I think it was like 600% increase or something just in the top five WNBA All-Star votes. And that just shows that fandom. Like, people
Mhm.
are tuning in and they're excited about those players and the individual storylines, and they're following them and they want to see them out there. So yeah,
Yeah,
huge, huge.
it's good stuff. It's awesome. All right, so let's rewind the clock. So where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child?
Oh my goodness. I grew up in Topsfield, which is north of Boston, at about 25 miles. And pretty rural community at the time. I would say now feels like it's within commuting distance, but at the time felt like, good little bit away from Boston, but with enough proximity to feel like you could get in and see those games. Hockey and basketball were sort of our favorites as a family. My like what was I like in my childhood? I'd call it first of all balanced and like with a good degree of range, which is kind of becoming my favorite word. We had lots of animals actually, which was like an area of responsibility, which you teach your kids, like have responsibility for something beyond yourself, and you kind of grow up with that level of accountability and focus. And for us, we had lots of animals, and we were very deeply engaged in sports early on, but we had to get ourselves there oftentimes. So it's like ride your bike and get to the field, six balls and, backpack and carrying them and try to, get myself to a place where I could pursue a sport that I loved. Um, Studying was also a big focus. My parents were very big on education. And so it was just like, again, with personal responsibility, focus on the things you love and the things that you're passionate about, work hard. My dad was a big, huge presence, both my parents for sure. My father sadly passed away last year. So I've been, thinking about him quite a bit this past year because he was such an influence in my life. Um, really focused on sort of the big values of integrity and work ethic. And he was an entrepreneur himself. So for me, and so my mother as well, actually, and they had different, um, things that they were building, but we were involved in all of that. So venture creation at the time when it wasn't so sexy, it was kind of like almost rogue, oh, you're going to do that versus something that's tried and true for us and for me as a kid. It was all about like, can you yourself take accountability of your time, your life, and go build something? And so that's kind of what really, that focus, that energy, that inspiration that we can make the world a better place, and that time needed to be well spent and intentional, but also filled with the things and people that you love. So balanced work ethic, entrepreneurial, those were the things. And I think for me, they probably describe me as curious, active, a hard worker, and pretty optimistic and joyful in doing all of that.
Well, if my research is
And some,
correct, like so you went on, you studied at Harvard and you were a two-sport D1 athlete.
yes, well, that's true. Soccer and lacrosse. I will say I was a walk-on, so it wasn't like highly recruited, but they knew who I was, because when I went for my day at Harvard, I spent a lot of time with the team, which was great. I still had to earn my way on it. I was I was a good student, but probably well, for sure there were so many better specialists. I was a very solid, good student, and I was a pretty good soccer player. Lacrosse, I was just beginning. I started playing in high school, but there were many who started before. So I actually, when I started at Harvard, I got myself on the team, which was an accomplishment for sure. And then the lacrosse program, which was notable at Harvard at the time, but fairly concentrated where they recruited people from, like more like Long Island, and Virginia. But they looked at the soccer group and said, like, these are good athletes, and would anybody like to come over to play lacrosse, try out? And so a number of us did, and we weren't, at least for me, I went on to what would be a JV team there. So I was playing varsity soccer and then JV lacrosse. Such a great program, both of them, and it was really really fun and a big part of just overall my life there, being anchored both in sports and athletics.
I think it says a lot about you and your dr- not not to play on your investment firm's name, but drive of what as a walk-on like that speaks volumes of somebody that is able to do that and successfully earn a spot, a roster spot versus people that are heavily recruited. So that speaks
Thank you.
huge volumes. So you went off so you went to investment banking, Goldman Sachs after graduation.
Yes, I did. So, as you recall me just saying that my early life was very entrepreneurial, even as a child, I had like paper route and little businesses we were always trying to get off the ground. When I got into college, I was really focused on actually several, like, what could I start new there? Even though you sort of feel like you go into like a Harvard or any college and it feels as a student like they've got everything right there at your disposal. What could you create that's new? But I was always in the creation mode, my own concentration, because I wanted to combine things, um, different events I was trying to pull together, a new women's leadership group that I had started when I was there. So the decision to go to Goldman was, interesting, I think, for those who knew me, because I thought, well, aren't you the entrepreneurial one? Are you gonna like leave Harvard and try to go start something? But again, my father, who had been, a strong advisor in life and in everything, really believed in skill building. Like, you want to go and start something, do you have the skills? Very humbling kind of question. Like, well, I think so. Like, well, I don't. And maybe you should go learn from those who do it best. So, for instance, do you know finance? When I was in a liberal arts program, um, it wasn't at Wharton or any of those that sort of focus solely on finance or that discipline. So I walked into a Goldman interview having a very broad ranging curriculum in college. And, um, and they said, well, you don't have a lot of the academic, you know, focus that maybe some of these other specialized schools have, but this is a super interesting conversation. And I and I said, I want to learn the currency of business, and that is finance. And you guys are, in my opinion, the best at it. And I know I can learn that. And I'm really interested in sort of companies and understanding them through the numbers. Because I understand people really well, and markets I'm getting to know, but this piece I need to know, and I'll do, and I have all the grit to promise you I'll give you a mile. And they believed me and they took a chance. And so that was how I got to Goldman.
Cool. What prompted your decision to go back to B school at HBS?
Well, while I was at Harvard, I wrote a couple of case studies for the business school on United Parcel Service. And again, I was always interested in venture creation. So this thread's going to come through my life, and you'll see part of venture creation is about, seeing opportunity and seeing sort of the problems that are out there to be solved. And when I wrote those case studies for HBS, I was fascinated at the way students were learning. Thousands of cases, thousands of problems to be solved, really novel and interesting ways to solve them. Those protagonists that were successful at it, those that ran into problems, how they navigated that. Such a fascinating study, in my opinion. So as I finished up at Goldman, where I thought, gosh, it just over delivered on the experience that I hoped it would. It was super rigorous, but it was like each company and I was in real estate. So I was looking at real estate assets, but in the investment banking division. But it's just amazing how, you can understand whether it be real estate investing or company investing, the story through the numbers, but there was more of a story to be told. And as I thought about going back to Harvard and this time into the business school, it wasn't even a second thought, actually. I really thought, like, my learning has just begun. One day I will be focused on starting businesses or investing in businesses. But right now, my learning journey has just begun. I've learned the numbers. I want to understand the craft. I want to understand leadership. I want to have strong pattern recognition around a variety of different problems. And this is the place to do it if they would
Right.
accept me. So I had to apply and get in. That's not easy.
No, it's not. But you made it. All right. So after B school, what'd you do?
So after business school, in between 2 years, I got a job as a management consultant in my summer in between years. But I really wanted to actually get into product. But I had to convince them, in this case, General Mills, that I really would be that person that went from investment banking into consumer products. And uh, they just were like, really? Would that be you? And I was like, yes, really, it would be me. And but initially, um, they did not give me a summer internship. So I got a summer, like 1 week time at the end to come in and like get exposure, some sort of 1 week little program they had. But I did get a management consulting summer internship, and I tried to focus that time in product, which they allowed me to do, which then gave me a stepping stone into General Mills when I graduated. And there I had a very specific intention in mind. I wanted to learn how products were launched. I'm on my sort of path here to understand the currency of and the language of business in finance, and then understand how products are built and why people buy things. And so went to General Mills for 4 years. and became, as you know, we do, our path chooses us as much as we choose our path. I started out in Yo Play and then went over to Big G, which is a cereal division, but very quickly was in pipeline new product development. I was following an anthropologist around for 6 months, learning sort of what is the archetype of cereal, how do people think about themselves in the context of brands and an iconic brand like Cheerios, and launched was went into like launching a brand called Frosted Cheerios. So I just had this massive exposure now into how do you take like the fundamentals of budgeting, forecasting, learning how something's valued if it gets bigger. That was in part from sort of my experience at Goldman, over then into business school, now into General Mills, fundamental of basic brand building, learning how like thinking then about behavioral change and adoption, research, and building brands. And that's sort of what I took into Guinness when I then added my next stop in my career, Guinness Import Company, taking that to an emotional level. No better brand than Guinness in my mind, or very few, and thinking about what it means to be like um, part of a culture that's also a brand, and where that all started. So learned that aspect and then realized, gosh, technology, this is Web 1.0 land now, like just internet beginning to, show itself in that same time frame, rapidly changing the landscape for how we think about and interact with just about everything. And I kind of then made the leap into tech.
And how did that happen? Like, I guess there's a theme here that you identify, like you build a foundation that ultimately paves the way into what you're aiming to do, yet there needs to be some like probably convincing. Like it's not like you had a background in tech
Yes.
as,
Yes.
heading up marketing, that it was a logical fit, but you
Right.
had to.
So yes, good question. I um oftentimes had a like more in my mind, like more of my own vision that had to be communicated to others as I was breaking in from one thing to the next. Um, and obviously, people who I connected with that would help, right? It's never just alone. You wind up meeting someone, they believe in you, and they give you a break. And that happened again and again. Um, with respect to this shift, that it's important to understand the context and the time. So this was like 1999, and I think I got that timing right. Yeah, 98, 99. There was this big pickup in the market around the internet, right? There was just like Web 1.0 literally was changing everything. But the the appetite for marketing people had gone from tech to then like brand. You have to learn, like, you have to know how to build a brand to break through.
Hmm,
And there
okay.
was no real brand people that had come up natively within the tech world yet with respect to internet. So they were looking for people who actually had some marketing and brand understanding to come over and learn the tech world. And so when I got in, although I think I'd love to say, oh, it was just so convincing that I could go from one to the other, but it was a little bit of both. Like they were like, okay, you can learn this. It's a new landscape for everybody. So you'll learn it along with everybody else. But what you know on how to build brands in this competitive world, of products launching and services. In this case, it was direct hit technology. So it was a search and product engine. That search engine had been launched and product engine was getting launched. And so that was, what I came over to do under a phenomenal entrepreneur, Mike Cassidy, who had started this as a co-founder from the MIT 50K at the time, um, which then turned into the MIT 100K when in later years.
So direct hit, but so they were like they were an actual search engine or like
Oh,
because they
search engine optimization. Yes. So they were kind of a Google competitor at the
Mhm.
time, both similar, and but different. Google based off of links and direct hit was more of a popularity search engine
Hmm.
that would look at an algorithm that had an algorithm actually developed by um, someone else from Mike was a business guy and then Gary was the tech entrepreneur. But yes, it was a popularity search engine based on algorithm on click-through streams, recency, relevancy, other things like that that were brought together to evaluate essentially the amount of relevance between a search term that you might put in and what people um, and what kind of sites would be most relevant to that. So,
Got it.
a
Okay.
very interesting, amazing tech, and at the time was OEM'd into other types of search portals that were out there, Lycos and um, others like that were using the technology underneath.
All right. So it looks like you then went on eventually after, running, a marketing firm for a bit to start your own company, Ziptiva. Did I
Yes,
pronounce that right?
yes,
Okay.
yes, you did. Well, and Ziptiva was actually a one of several things that were sort of in that market edge kind of my initial marketing firm where I'd sort of bring together a lot of resources to work on go-to-market strategy for companies that were launching um, something into the market. So very early stage. And some a bit later stage, truthfully, but fundamentally early stage. And in the context of that, we were looking at a problem, a number of us, that was around college students who were trying to market themselves better, to kind of bring together all the things that they were doing, whether it be athletes or extracurricular activities, into one sort of more dimensionalized resume that could be online versus much more of a like paper version or 2D look at oneself. This was kind of bringing graphics, storylines, videos a little bit before its time because it couldn't quite get this fit into the common app, which had been launched. So, yes, we took a crack at that. I think there was a lot of excitement. I was actually really excited about it. But the go to market on it was tough, both in terms of sales cycles for schools who were interested, and a lot of universities were particularly intrigued. Um, but they were but hard to get through with the common app kind of lock on the market.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Because I was like, this may be like an early version of like a college LinkedIn, but then I'm like, well,
Yes,
but the platform would be very relevant for today with NIL and athletes and, huddle and
absolutely,
building
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
It'd been perfect for today. It'd been perfect for today.
Yes.
But it's
Yeah.
all these things, you can have insight, but
Yeah.
you have to have an insight, a tech, and the market has to be ready to adopt something. Otherwise, the time it takes and the capital required to get through that cycle, is too long. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what we determined. But yeah, it was really fun to work on it. And I do think it was a little bit before its time.
All right. So what'd you do next?
So from there, I actually did go back to Harvard Business School, but this time to run the Rock Center for Entrepreneurship. This was another bit of intentionality of looking at like first part skill building on the operating side, and then thinking about, okay, I've become I've been actually changing out much of my time with these companies for uh, for equity. So I'd already gotten started a bit on the investing side and was convinced that I had had enough experiences on the operating side to really understand how businesses are built and to go deep into both strategy and execution. and that this now would start the second phase of my time, which would be about investing, which I was particularly intrigued with. Um, and but my the stopover was going to be like, how do I get maximum pattern recognition here on the investing side, by especially on the early stage where I felt I had the greatest affinity for. So going back to Harvard Business School, this time to run the Rock Center for Entrepreneurship, from taking over from actually one of my advisors when I was actually at college, in the undergrad, um, was really exciting for me because I could see 1,000 different startups at all different stages, including some of the high impact alumni ventures. And so I did that, and was able to connect with, brilliant Arthur Rock, who was the benefactor of the Rock Center and the pioneer of the asset class. And then Bill Solomon, who's legendary, at Harvard Business School, and Tom Eisman, they were both co-heads on the faculty side. So what a privilege it was for me to be able to meet well, Bill I knew from when I was a student, but to sort of re-engage with him, to meet Tom, to connect with Arthur Rock, and put forth a vision and a strategy for really elevating the Rock Center into a place where it would be programmatically very rich around the sort of the counsel that a lot of students needed to get off the ground, to think critically about success, and to some extent, failure, because that happens a lot in the early stage, and to think and to access the resources through a summer fellows program, through a new venture program, through an accelerator and funds, intersecting with the iLab that had just launched and what was going on there. So yeah, that was a terrific couple years, and allowed me to get deeply into the early stage. And several of those companies I went later on as an angel to fund.
So how did you end up getting involved as an investor full time?
Yeah. So from there, I had started actually also um, an EIR program that had already been established, but I was able to sort of get that to another level and connect with a number of venture investors, one of whom was Regina Cesare, who had started Glasswing Ventures. And so when I determined that it was time to move back into the private sector and take my angel investing to another level, which I was really excited to do. I had started with Launchpad. I was part of the Boss Syndicate. I'd become, active angel investor in the Boston community. I then took a venture partner role there with her, who I had brought into the Rock Center as an EIR, and that was amazing. And she was just she's an incredible investor herself, but also, focused on a space that was emerging and is now, everything that everyone talks about in AI and machine learning. And Rick Grinnell also in cybersecurity. And so those two were, had a lot of vision, and it was again another big privilege of mine to work alongside them and get a, deeper kind of just focus on venture investing. And so that's how I got started there. But I was already an active angel, and then starting to think about the next step as firm building for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Radina was a guest on the podcast maybe 3.5 years ago now.
Oh, great.
And it's just like I haven't talked to her in a while, but when I see her, I just want to say, man, you guys were ahead of the curve
Ahead of the
because they were
curve.
just
Yes,
brand day one was AI machine learning. It wasn't like they
that's right.
dove in. It was years ago. This is what we're gonna do. So
That's
unbelievable.
right. Yeah, they weren't hopping on, you know, just a sexy trend. think they had deep and do have deep conviction and understanding about what they're doing and the value that it adds and the disruptive capability. And yeah, and just great thought leadership about it. So kudos to them for sure.
I subscribe to Rodina's newsletter, and it is
Mm,
so far above my head of what she's talking about because
hmm.
she is so deep in this world that it's just amazing. But all right, well
Yeah,
let's talk about what you're up to now. So what is Drive
yeah,
by DraftKings?
yeah. So Drive by DraftKings is an early stage tech fund. We launched with a multi-stage flexibility to put some of our capital to work. Where the opportunity was greatest for strong venture-backed returns, but we're primarily seed-led. So seed and A is where we focus. Our check size in the 250 to 2.5 million early entry point, but we reserve a lot of capital to follow on. We're focused on sports tech and entertainment. That's really where we're deep. Our conviction is, sort of around these three areas of gaming, fandom, and human performance. But we have, strong belief that that wedges out to much bigger markets. So we think about, um, ourselves as sort of tech in general, but specifically and thematically focused in sports tech and entertainment. We have a unique relationship with DraftKings. It's called Drive by DraftKings. We are a fully independent venture fund, but we have DraftKings as a core anchor and part of a really a strong strategic platform. We also have an all-star network of great advisors, athletes, and executives in tech, media, and gaming. And so we consider ourselves a, classic venture model, but really strong strategic platform that gives us unique access and insight into the space in which we invest.
Well, we started talking at the beginning of our interview here about the, momentum and excitement in women's sports.
Yeah.
And that's obviously an anchor, but there's also so much else going on, like college sports with NIL. I mean, that is just insanely disruptive over what we've been seeing in the expanded college football playoff just this weekend alone with football and how what
Yes.
that means now. It just and how these athletes are getting, these large amounts of sums to play their sport. The emergence
Yeah.
of pickleball or lacrosse. Like I think lacrosse, like the professional lacrosse league has been doing exceptionally well, and it's been a different format. So like like what are you excited about? Like what do you like you talked about the three different lanes that you focus on, but like
Yes.
what's on your radar?
Well, a couple things that you mentioned there. First of all, just to speak to the changing landscape in sports, it is absolutely true. Like one of the things that's so exciting about our space is it's rapidly evolving all the time. You feel like you blink and you might miss it. And and that is just a, a big opportunity driver, not only for us as investors, but also as, for those that are starting in the space, and not just for sports, but also for gaming in general. Gaming, a third of the world's population, um, is gaming every single day. So that's another big driver. But the so first, let me, I guess, touch on what's driving some of that growth, and then I'll maybe hit on what's really exciting that we're focused on. So first of all, I guess what's driving the growth um, for sports? I think there's just digital transformation in tech. You just have to sort of start there. I know it's very broad, but it's like streaming, the whole digital kind of move from broadcast to streaming. As you think about what that has done to change the fan experience and to expand reach of sports and sports viewership. It's extraordinary. Um, Data analytics and AI, to sort of touch on what we were just my own beginning in venture and kind of how it's sweeping into this space and every other space in truly transformational ways. But this is, allowing us to deliver like personalized content to people in ways they've never experienced before, where you still sort of what you call lean out and passively watch the show. You now can like lean in and get the kind of experience that you want, and so much of that also in augmented ways. Um, for athletes, there's also the data and the analytics and the AI, extraordinary impact as they can start to understand better how to optimize their own performance and how to think about like their injury prevention so that they're stay in the game longer. So these are really important things as we think about like digital and just technology transformation in our space. Um, I'd say the, fan, just touching more on the fan engagement piece, um, social media, influencers, this whole aspect of just fan experience has been transformative. And as well as for companies trying to reach consumers, it's used to be sort of like buy an ad and hope to reach them. And now a lot of this, like direct to the consumer stuff, is through influencers who can socialize things and get, very broad reach, almost, you know, arguably even more than some media to influence and inspire adoption around new products. So this piece of sort of how is media, from the broadcast to the streaming, from centralized media focus to decentralized, and where athletes become influencers and creators become influencers in very powerful ways. These are all huge drivers for the sports industry and changing the game significantly, whether it be for sports enterprises or for the businesses underneath them. Specifically on NIL, you mentioned, yeah, it's been fascinating because players have, realized that, look, yes, they're playing for the joy of the game. They have to have that mission in mind from the start. I'd say even, to compete at that level, but they also realize their value. And so the NCAA, in May and having to like agree to share up to 20 million a year with the athletes and up to 22% of the revenue and media rights and all of that, that's been a long time in coming, and I think it's deserving. It's deserving. So that's really changed. I think it's still in the midst of change for how athletes view themselves, the relationship with these schools and the conferences and realignment and all of that, and access. This is life-changing kind of compensation for the athletes while they play and for their use of their name, image, and likeness. And so it's powerful, powerful change for sure.
So like anything,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
so much technology that's taking advantage of this.
there's technology, there's kind of touched on NIL and some of the digital transformation. There's emerging sports leagues, and so athletes can get involved in so much more, and the potential for that to be visible on the national stage. We're seeing that accelerate as well. So pickleball, as an example, lacrosse you mentioned with the PLL, but there's so many other emerging leagues that are beginning, and I don't know exactly that they'll all, reach the Olympics, but clearly the Olympics has added to its breadth as well with lots of different sports, and we're just seeing the access to the sports on a youth level and on a professional level expand in super exciting ways. So I think there's a lot of growth here. I think it's technology driven. I think it's market driven. I think it's regulatory driven, and all of those things coming together to create, I think, a growth market that will, be driven by obviously commercial media and, and in stadium and in play experiences.
What's like, I guess, that's what's driving everything as far as this innovation and digital transformation. So like let's like what's core to what like if I'm a founder and I want to get
Mm.
on your radar, like what are you interested in and what how do I even get on your radar?
Yeah, yeah. So getting on our radar is um it shouldn't be hard to do. Number one, if you're interested and you're building something, um, there's, intros are always great because they just, we get so many um inbounds, but we like inbounds. So please feel very welcome, Meredith at drivebydraftkings.com or LinkedIn or tweet us. We got a great team, so not just me, but we've got several other investors, and so info at Drive by DraftKings. You'll find us that way. But in addition, I think there's get some momentum. I think for every entrepreneur to be able to begin to build your own buzz and your connections and get out there and launch even early things, early prototypes. We tend to, obviously follow the markets closely. Boston is an ecosystem we do pay attention to because we're headquartered here. And so I think it's a combination of outreach, building your own buzz, launching something early, getting out there. Social media, being your own good microphone to kind of show people what you got. And a combination of all those things helps a lot.
And is there like
Yeah.
specific areas that you're like most excited about?
Yeah.
You talked about the three different areas, but I guess like what's happening
Let's
right now?
Right. So we are um, deeply focused, really across those three areas. So I have to say, like, the we really are actively investing across the three. Our recent investments, we've been focused on real money skill gaming. We find that to be a very interesting area, um, especially as free to play mobile has still obviously quite dominant, but growth rates have tapped a little bit with the IDFA and privacy laws are harder to actually, more expensive to acquire customers. So real money, hyper casual skill gaming where people can, play head on head, is, a great way to monetize some of the gaming experience. So we find that interesting. We are bullish on, some of the, um, performance technology. We have invested in a sleep tech company. We like the um, neurotech and metabolic health space, although we think that that's still emerging. So we're taking a look at a number of those opportunities on the fan experience side. Um, we like the more immersive tech, but probably more on the AR side of things early. I mean, that we believe VR is going to, still have its day as things continue, but start to look at like good, strong use of data analytics to drive kind of more immersive experiences in the fan experience and certainly ones where people have, you know, high interactive kind of quotients, so rather than passive, and personalized kind of experiences all around. So as we think about gaming to the fan experience and then to some of the human performance end, I think we're excited about the potential of all those three spaces are growing north of 10%. So we've and with the combination of sort of evolving consumer adoption, these regulatory changes, and the technology continuing to advance along all levels, and especially with AI, we are very open to all those areas, and new ideas.
Now, what's the process like for raising capital?
Well, the process is always similar, I think, where we take a look. We're looking at the A team founder, right? So we first taking a look at, is this a person that we or a team that we believe in that's has insight into a space and a problem set and the market, and ideas on how they might have some advantage, to solve a big problem that's worth solving, take advantage of a big opportunity that's out there from a change that may have occurred or an intersection of different changes. Um, so insight seeking, I guess, strong A team that's agile and can, peek around the corner. Um, we come in and that's sort of our first look. So in terms of like, what are we looking for in the process? That begins with conversations and, or some kind of examination of what's being built so that we can see the insight, but it's always a combination of that. And then, you go through a diligence stage today. I think, we're where a few years ago, you might be able to get off with like get attention with just an idea. I think we're looking for a little bit more of a prototype of the idea to be out there, because I think the tougher to raise capital. So that means you have to sort of be a little farther along, to actually have that first 18 months get you to a set of metrics that will then allow you to raise the next capital. So I'd say that's sort of more of a truth of what today's market looks like. I think you can't over raise when you're just beginning, but that raise has got to take you to enough of a proof point to be able to raise again. So we're definitely in the early stage for sure. There's room for experienced founders with strong ideas to get off early, or for new founders that have been able to bootstrap a little bit and show, not only their vision but an early version of what they can do to get funding. Um, and so it just depends. For sort of mid stage, we do a little more diligence. When you're really early, it's all about you, um, and kind of where you can take this and your level of insight and execution history.
So what have been the like kind of the biggest challenges that you've seen for entrepreneurs trying to build a company in the sports industry?
Um, I think the challenges, in sports are, I don't want to say they're that different than, um, at the highest level than in other industries, at least at the earliest stage. I mean, I would point back to, like, you really got to have this A team. It's hard today to, to execute in these fast moving markets, quickly enough before they move right from underneath you. So, you see, like, even when you begin, if you can't get out to market soon enough with what you have, so you have to have sort of fast paced, strong agility, right? Deep insight. And then you got to get out there, because otherwise, like, the market moves. And then you got to think about, like, what else do I need? Am I playing to compete, or am I playing to win? And this is a very, very fast moving market, because the way technology is changing the game. So I think, you know, a lot, the pace is one. Two is channel dependencies. How are you going to get to market? So as I mentioned earlier, um, some of the traditional ways are getting disrupted. That's a good thing for startups because it democratizes some access to the markets. But, um, understanding how to leverage, if you're a consumer business, um, how to leverage the influencers and social and other ways to get attention, really key. If you're an enterprise business, then you got to look at that. Like, what is it, you know, what are your dependencies there? and even if it makes sense, it's creating more efficiency for your customer or better efficacy. What does it get to say? What does the health of that business look like? And how long is it going to take to actually the sales cycle to get in and to, and who, how do they get to yes? So it's a complicated array of partnerships, sometimes being in the middle where it can be hard for an enterprise business in sports. And then for a consumer business in sports, you got to be able to get out there quick enough before the bigger players with, for instance, in sports betting, it's become highly concentrated. So there's a lot of innovation and a lot of capital with a fairly concentrated few. And if you're a challenger, you may be able to get out, but are you able to get out with something big enough, fast enough, get to scale quick enough before the bigger ones sort of take over the space? So I think, it sort of depends on what angle you're looking at and what part of this industry. But I think there's lots of opportunity there, but you have to sort of be thoughtful about customer, consumer, and what it takes to get to market.
Well, we talked about AI, and obviously it's probably part of every tech stack of the business model somehow, some way now. So where are you seeing the greatest intersection between AI and the sports tech landscape?
Mm. Yeah. So AI, it's had impact on just so many segments within this. It's such a big topic, but I think, you know, um, teams, broadcasting, gambling, gaming, we've seen just major disruption across all four of those segments within, sports and gaming. Um, I think with respect to teams, there's, these AI analytic tools, and you mentioned them earlier. Um, they can help coaches with like analyzing game footage and assessing player performance and recruiting and training. So that's been huge. Injury prevention and recovery. We've definitely seen AI predicting, injury risks by analyzing data, biomechanics, workload, historical injuries, things like that. That's been interesting to see. With respect to like the fan engagement space. So it'd be sort of broadcasting and others. Um, Personalized content and recommendation. I mentioned that, but that's been really interesting how AI can analyze fan behavior, um, deliver this personalized content, get to highlights, news, merchandise recommendations, and all of that super efficiently and effectively to engage fans. Um, I mentioned, immersive tech, but that's been interesting within fan engagement, AR and VR, overlaying game stats to create even greater engagement. That's a lot AI driven. Chatbots, obviously, for customer service. Um, I'd say automated content creation when you think about, the content and media space. For sports betting, we're seeing AI probably in the sort of more future, but coming close in predictive modeling and risk management, also delivering bets in personalized ways. So that's, I think, pretty interesting application. So I think lots in the space. It's around every corner. I'm a huge believer in, it's not overhyped. It's part of every segment and every good founder's equation somewhere to think about either how they're competing against it or more likely how they're going to incorporate.
All right, what are three apps you can't live without? It can't be Slack, email, or calendar.
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me this. Can't be that. Well, I mean, for me, navigation is key. So, health apps are key because I'm, always on the move. And I feel like, whether it be sleep, um, or some of the nutrition tracking or just my movement overall. And now I'm really interested in body comp and how, what we do affects kind of how we look and feel. So that's super significant. Is that two or three? I think I got to maybe two or three there. Can't live without. But yeah, I'm super so focused on, and I guess always there's, the ability to sort of chat, tweet, all that LinkedIn stuff from a professional standpoint is so key in terms of just knowledge pickup and knowledge transfer. So that cover it.
How about a podcast or book recommendation for entrepreneurs?
Oh goodness. How about VentureFizz? How about that
Yes,
for
I love
podcasts?
that one.
Okay. So good. I like Invest with the Best. I think there's some really good stuff there. I'm a big all-in fan because I just love their range of topics. Um, Book. I mentioned range. I think about my own experience and career. Maybe I'm predisposed to that, but David Epstein's book, at least, really good, like intro, chapter one-ish, you can get the feel. But it's essentially challenging the notion of super hyper specialization, which I think you need in your companies for sure. And I do believe in narrow and deep develops an expertise. But I think in this increasingly kind of complex world where it's rapidly changing and there's super opportunity in the intersections of that change, those that do have some range in their experience and their mindset, think of like Steve Jobs and the calligraphy thing, or like, just being able to take insight from one experience and bring that to another, is disruptive in itself and is powerful because it unlocks, like, we are more complex. Our businesses intersect people, their lives, other businesses in, I think, the greatest of those in myriad ways. And they're never, I think they, at least iconic type brands, businesses are, are broader based than single point solutions. And those are things that we're looking for, um, at least at Drive. And so I think having some range in your perspective, in your skill set, and being able to kind of think up a level versus just only narrow and deep, although those help, those people help and they're required. Um, that's interesting. So I think the book range is interesting.
All right, last question. What do you like to do for fun outside of work?
Oh gosh, that would be a layup of a question because my work, which focuses on sports and gaming, my
Mhm.
love personally in sports is what we do for fun. Hence, I was just at the U.S. Open this past weekend. Um, but it is truly a labor of love. I love the venture journey. I love, but not just investing, but like people who are challenging convention, who are, it could be also non-work related, just in solving social problems. And then people who are um, active and engaged. And for me, that's really fun. Biking, hiking, um, being outside and competing. So
That's
that
perfect.
probably covers some of
That's perfect. Well, Meredith,
it.
thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background and obviously your experience and the great work you're doing as an investor and all the great advice.
Great. Thank you. It was so wonderful being with you. And I enjoyed it as well. Thanks, Keith.